We're all familiar with stories in the Bible about leprosy, but I think few of us can imagine the degree and the amount of pain that was associated with the isolation that came from that particular disease. We hear in the first reading from Leviticus that they're kept outside the community, which meant for Jews who were actually, because of the times, clustered together as one people, it meant that that whoever had leprosy couldn't be part of the community. Today, it's not a big problem. We got a lot of people that don't want to be part of the community. You know, you got the spiritual but not religious movement and so on and so forth. People don't mind missing Mass. Just imagine a different mindset that said, if I'm not part of this, I'm lost. I have no identity. There are a few of us like that, and I'm glad you're here. So that's one of the first things, even to begin to imagine what that isolation must have been like. I remember, some of you may remember, of a certain vintage, Ben-Hur. I remember that scene where he finally finds his mother. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. I hate to do generational kind of stuff. But that's a very striking thing. In the Middle Ages, they made sure someone who had this disease, which could be a lot of different, psoriasis, any number of things, not Hansen's disease, which we understand today. They put a bell on a person. They always had to ring the bell. So this was another form of isolation. Even in our own time, the beginning of the 20th century, in Carville, Louisiana, there was a sanitarium in a bend, an isolated bend of the Mississippi River, where they put people with this kind of illness. Again, very much isolated. Or some of us know about Damien the leper. So he was with the people. You know, he had that dramatic moment when you say, "we lepers," right? But you don't understand, one of the things I read about him that really strikes me, when he wanted to go to confession himself, he rowed out on a boat where the bishop was, and the bishop refused to allow him to come on the boat. So from his little dinghy, he had to yell out his sins that everybody would hear. You're laughing. Imagine what that would be like. That would really be, you know, all of us that had the experience, we went to confession, someone in there was really, oh. Don't want to get any ideas. So you have this kind of thing. It's a really painful thing. The only comparison today that we would have would be Ebola. And so much do we admire people, medical people that went there, risked their lives being in contact. Families didn't want to let someone with a fever go because they'd never see them again. Very, very painful thing, the isolation. Comes to the gospel. There are a number of things that I think are important. First of all, I can't avoid talking about the gospel. A leper came to Jesus. Bad. He's already broken quarantine. So one of the interesting questions is, what was it that he saw in Jesus that gave him the courage to break the quarantine? He came right up to him and knelt down, and it tells us he begged him. He said, "If you wish, you can make me clean." Now, he must have heard that we're not out of the first chapter of the Gospel of Mark. We've been there for several Sundays. So maybe he heard about that demon that was in the synagogue and stood up and shouted, and then Jesus says, "Be quiet, get out of here." Maybe he heard about Peter's mother-in-law. Remember, Jesus touched her. Forbidden. She was ill. And then she was waiting on table for these men. Forbidden. Only men were supposed to, servants, male servants. There's a lot of stuff going on here with rule breaking. Some of you would enjoy that. So, says he's moved with pity. The actual translation, it's the bowels, the very innards, something deep inside in Jesus is touched. And what does he do? He doesn't kind of go, "Okay, you're cured." What does he do? It says here, he stretched out his hand and he touched him. He stretched out his hand and he touched them. And he says, I do will it. It's like saying, "Why did you wait? I wanted you to come. Don't hesitate. I cure you." Then he warns him sternly. You say, "Don't tell anyone." He goes and blares it everywhere. He didn't have social media, but it's just the same. publicized the whole matter, and so on. And the irony at the end of the reading is, this leper can go everywhere, and Jesus can't. It says he can't even go around openly. If you remember, he's already been through it once. In the first chapter of Mark, still already. He healed, threw out the demon in the synagogue, goes to the home of Simon's mother-in-law, cures her, and at evening time, when the Sabbath was over and people could carry people he was flooded with people. He went off and prayed at night. And they came to him and said, "You got a great gig going," says Peter. "This is great. They're all looking for you." And he says, "No, I have to go and preach the gospel." And he goes on. So this is how it unfolds. 3 points. First one is about the depth of conversion. Second one is the importance of touch. And third is the courage to be touched. First, the depth of conversion. I love miracles. Is there anybody here not in favor of miracles? But you know, physical miracles, for example, and thank God for the medical profession, they seem to do all sorts of things today that make what looked impossible possible. Conversion is something deeper. It has to go deeper. It's not just skin deep. It's not just skin deep. I like to picture anybody could have, 2 withered hands. Somebody cures them and now they can steal with both hands. Unless there's a conversion on a deeper level, even the external sign, you could say, never really takes root. So the issue of conversion is something that is not simply a miracle. Jesus keeps saying in the Gospel of Mark, don't tell anyone. Why not tell anyone? Isn't this good news? Shouldn't it be spread? The reason we believe that Mark is doing this, never had a chance to interview him, but the reason we believe that Mark is doing this is because people wanted to make Jesus simply a wonder worker. Somebody could do everything. This is just great. And Jesus was trying to say, you're not going to understand what I'm about until my crucifixion, the suffering, and only then the resurrection. Otherwise, we get a very superficial view of religion. Second point, touch. There's an interesting game. A doctor once asked me this. If you could lose any one of your senses, which one would it be? Which one would you most be willing to let go? Sight? I see a lot of no's. Hearing? Touch? If you think about it, there are people that are blind, and there are people that can't hear, and they're perfectly normal psychologically, and they function, and they have a decent... If you have no touch, just picture the situation. Touch is so central to everything. If you'd break a bone, you wouldn't know it. If you have your hand over a fire, you wouldn't know it. If you smash your thumb with a hammer, you might see it kind of grow up. If coffee was scalding, you wouldn't know it. You'd burn your whole throat. Touch is so central to what it means to be human. In the 1980s, there were these Romanian orphanages that were discovered. They had very few caretakers, and the young people, the children, were not touched. And they suffered all kinds of psychological disorder, affective attachments that were not functional. Very difficult. When you say someone rubs me the wrong way, someone touches a nerve, someone is tactless, they have no touch, no sense of touch, they're completely lost. They create isolation because they don't have really functioning touch. Jesus was touched. He was moved to the bowels, and he touched. Touching is so... If you don't have any sensitivity, any sense of touch, how do you show affection? How do you even make love? You would feel nothing. If you were blind, you could. If you were deaf, you could. Touch is central. Touch is important. Third, courage. This leper had courage. He had the courage and the insight, whatever it was he saw in Jesus. He broke the rules, and he went to Jesus. And he said, if you want, you can heal me. You know how we say, oh Lord, I'm not worthy that you should enter under my roof? Right. Who among us is worthy? But if we push that area, am I worthy to receive Jesus Christ? I think we reverse a lot of the New Testament. Jesus invited everybody, especially those who are not worthy. Anybody here who is worthy, please stand. I dare you. Don't do that. I think what's really important for us is to say but the word has been said. The word has been said. You are good, you are welcome, you should come to the table. Pope said it beautifully. The church is not a society for the perfect, but a field house for the broken. I've always wondered about that ever since I was an adolescent, about, well, you can't go to communion because of this or that. You should go to communion precisely because you need the Lord in healing. Welcome to the table. Be touched. We have the Eucharist, not just mental, but physical. We touch, we feel it. We have a kiss of peace. Ooh, don't touch me. Yes. We are embodied. All that's very important. That touch is so abused, that's another whole question, but touch is redemptive and transforming. And we need to realize that it's that important. So my prayer for you this Lent, my prayer for me, is that I allow Jesus to touch me. And touch me right from the depths so that I may be changed and know his love. Amen.